And yeah, so we mentioned that part of the agenda would actually tackle the approaches for tagging, and the consultation paper of the IFRS Foundation and ISB is actually providing some suggestions or intentions that were serving them when creating the taxonomy. So basically, the ISSB is also aware that this is a new area for digital reporting, and hence will require probably a longer learning curve to ensure that everything is working smoothly in the end. Especially since most of the taxonomy will be actually a narrative parts, which compared to the financial taxonomy is quite less applied. In the context of the CIPC, we do have a requirement to individually tag the PFSs and just block tag, for example, the nodes. But for example, in the US, the nodes are also detailed tags. So depending on how certain jurisdictions are actually implementing the block tagging or detailed tagging approaches, that's a question for the jurisdiction. However, this is looking at this from the perspective of the standard setter and its intention. Obviously, this is something that we can derive from and establish this in a different way as we would like to see it in South Africa. But this is again something that we'll be discussing in the coming months before implementing this taxonomy into the CIPC scope. But just to summarize, and this is actually something that I was already telling you about. So basically, the principle that they applied was actually to make this as easy to understand and as easily identifiable by the preparers for tagging as the standards are written. So the taxonomy is actually constructed in a way that reflects sometimes even the indentation of things that are actually described in the level of the standards. So if there are bullets, there are some sub-elements presented at the taxonomy level to make it simply easier for users to find a relevant element that they wish to apply for tagging of their disclosures using XBRL. And here's actually nice a summary of that was presented in the IFRS Foundation materials. However, there is even more interesting slide also coming from the materials of the IFRS Foundation, which actually shows how the foundation is actually envisaging the granularity of the reporting. So there are different schools in terms of how you tag the information, whether you nest the tagged information, so you present broader tags on the, I don't know, entire disclosure, and then have some sub-tags below that will just depict the specific data. The problem with this kind of, we call it a multi-tagging approach, is that in many cases, when this information is later on transformed and, I don't know, stored in the database, it may contain a duplicated information, which basically may lead to some issues with analyzing this data, especially if we are talking about long text and so on. This might be tricky. So the approach that IFRS Foundation is suggesting, and actually how they are reflecting this at the taxonomy level, is that they try to limit to the extent which is crucial, not to tag certain information twice. So here on the left-hand side, we have an example of a disclosure around risk management, which basically within the Blackboard is actually considered as an entire disclosure on the risk management. And on the left-hand side, we are seeing actually in those different colors, those parts that will be tagged, and they are represented on the right-hand side with the elements coming from the the SDT taxonomy. So as you can see, there is no one broad tag that will actually this is the highlight the entire risk management part. Instead of that, they have separate elements used. So for example, for the risk management and some kind of introductory information on the risk management, they are suggesting to use other disclosures about risk management field. Then for the sustainability related risks, there is a different element that will be applied to using that. There are also a Boolean field within that could be marked as true, which is highlighted in yellow. And there is also some additional disclosure that is part of the sustainability related risk. So they remove this one broader tag. And rather want to go in a more granular approach where more granular elements are actually applied in tagging. This is the approach that is proposed by the foundation, but this is not the only approach, and we can actually tackle that from the different perspective. So during the conference, there was a lot of questions, and my take from the conference is that the biggest, let's say, thing that is that must be somehow well defined and so on, whether the disclosure shall be mandatory or whether they should be voluntary, because that would actually impact the way and the actual whether the filers will want to file this information. And obviously with voluntary filing, there is always a risk that nobody will file. And we noted that in the early days when XBRL was being introduced in those jurisdictions where the voluntary filing was applied, people were simply not following that because that was something new for them. That would require some better understanding, some learning, also some software and so on. And hence they decided not to file using this format and using some old ways. Now with the mandatory filing, it is tricky because obviously there might be some legal requirements and so on, and some fees if, for example, you would not report that information. So that this is something that would need to be thought through very thoroughly, so that it will be introduced in a way that would actually satisfy the needs of the regulators that want to see this information, the needs of the investors, but also would not scare the filers on the way who will be actually doing this work, so that the data users will be able to use that particular data. And the more granular the tagging is, the more time this tagging actually will consume the reporting entities, the more likely it would be that they would not want to file, because that would be translated into higher costs for them to be compliant. Hence, this approach of IFRSs potentially could be also deviated from by the CIPC in a way that potentially, because right now we will not see a kind of a main element, a main text block element that will be able to cater for the entire risk management part. And there's no such field. There's just an abstract element at the level of the taxonomy. I can actually go back to the taxonomy and show you that, because if we go to the climate related disclosures and we will go to the risk management, you'll see that we have just the abstract, and below we have already a detailed disclosure, already specific disclosures. In, for example, accounting taxonomy, they were still having those broader text blocks that could be then reused to tag the broader information. So potential deviation from the CIPC in order to make it easier for the filers, and for example, at the first time introducing just the broad tagging of the entire disclosure, could be that we could replace this risk management abstract element that is containing the other more specific text blocks with a single text block that would allow the users just to tag in the entire statement. Obviously, this would not bring much value from the perspective of analysis of that text, because we will have a long block of text with without the natural text processing and some probably AI techniques that would allow us to actually get something from that text in an automated manner that would be more trickier. But at the same time, you at least have some kind of a structuralization of that information, so that whenever CIPC or others data users, consumers will be looking at that, we'll be able to at least see how the disclosures are made, how complete they are, and so on. So again, this is another important topic that in the coming months we will need to discuss in order to understand best on how this should be approached in the context of South Africa. So yeah, I will maybe also stop here because this is also probably a quite hot topic, and many of you could also have already some considerations around that. So again, feel free to jump in and share your thoughts with us. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, but I guess Chuma would like to maybe make a comment on that, so I will give him the floor.
No, okay, so I think, similar to how we approach the IFRS taxonomy, in as much as we adopted the taxonomy as is, when we implemented, we didn't require all tags to be, or rather all line items to be tagged. We went with the minimum tagging approach. So that could be potentially how we approach also the sustainability disclosures, by saying, okay, we supposing that both S1 and S2 cover the broader scope that we are interested in, amongst other things, together with extensions. We could just say for South Africa Inc., this is the minimum we're looking for. That covers both what the investment community is looking for and what regulators are also looking for. So again, since we're not trying, especially for S2, where you'll have multiple. I mean, there's so many narratives around climate-related disclosures and the metrics on emissions, etc. We don't want to, as CIPC, and I'm sure also other regulators are of the same sentiment. We don't want to be climate police and say you have not disclosed your emissions properly, or you have not disclosed emissions in perhaps one of your operating areas, operating segments. If we're looking at it from an integrated reporting perspective, we could just say minimum tags are this because these ones are applicable for South Africa, and they don't create an overburden or an additional burden on the current reporting scope. And these few or whatever set are the ones that add value without undue cost. So we might have to look at it like that, as opposed to saying tag S1, S2 as it appears in the current taxonomy. So that's our proposal as CIPC for now, but we obviously are going to socialize it even more and become more granular with the meetings that will take place with the DTIC and the FRSC later on in the year, I think somewhere in November. But we will give proper feedback to the market about that, so that we don't miss each other, where government goes ahead and leaves industry behind, or the industry goes ahead and leaves government behind. We have to coordinate these moving parts very well, so that the symphony produces the same sound to the entire audience. But yeah, that's how I would suggest we approach it, Michal. Thanks.
Thanks, Shuma. So if there are no other comments from the audience, I wanted to go to the last slide that we have around the SDT taxonomy, which is the actual timeline that was shared by the foundation in one of the, again, materials that are published together with the taxonomy. So right now, as you know, we are very few days after finishing of the public consultation. So as I was mentioning, on the 26th June, the standards were published, were then formed into the equivalent taxonomy and published on the IFRS taxonomy and IFRS Foundation website, and were subject to public consultation until 26 September. The period in which the comments were gathered is now closed, and the ISSB moved on to the reviewing of that feedback. What was mentioned by the foundation is the final taxonomy is expected in the first half of the 2024, with the standards being effective from 1st January 2024. H1 2024 is quite a long range, but we are probably, I mean, this is my personal view, that I would expect this to be published sometime around the same time as the accounting taxonomy is being published, which would make best sense from my side, but that also depends on the available resources on the taxonomy experts group on the side of the foundation, who's I think shared across the accounting and the sustainability taxonomy. So I think these are the same teams that are working on that. But if that is the case, and this is what we are right now expecting, Chuma will probably have some more details around that, as he is part of the ITCG, which is the IFRS Taxonomy Consultative Group. So whenever the exact dates or more, let's say, closer periods will be understood, then we'll of course share it with the group. And also from the perspective of the CAPC, the issuance of the final taxonomy will be at the same time the commencement of the works towards implementing that in the CAPC taxonomy. And as you all know, our goal is to have it introduced before the next year's rollout on 1st October 2024. So we wish to make as much work as possible prior to even publication of the final taxonomy to not, let's say, waste time after the publication of the taxonomy, is because the proposed taxonomy is already giving us a lot of ideas and ways on how we can actually approach that. So the work is currently ongoing, and then once the taxonomy is out, we'll start adapting that. Obviously, there'll be similarly as in the past years, this year and so on, some meetings with the software service providers, with the community members, professional organizations, regulators, and so on. I mean, the consultation, I guess, would be much broader than that we used to have around the accounting parts, which were already well known to the community and was not necessarily introducing that many new things on the way. But yeah, this is more or less the timeline to which the CAPC would like to align. So this is all from the perspective of the taxonomy itself. And again, we will share with you the slides, so you'll have access to all those links if you haven't found them yet by yourselves. And I have just two more slides for today in terms of what we are considering.